There is a specific moment that happens in almost every relationship with a deeply feeling woman. It happens around week 6, sometimes week 8. The man goes quiet. He starts taking longer to text back. And if you ask him what's wrong, he'll say, nothing, even though something clearly changed. Here's what actually happened. He got a full, unfiltered look at who she really is, and some primitive part of his brain hit the eject button. Not because she did anything wrong, because she did everything right, and he wasn't built for it yet. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand exactly why this happens. And more importantly, you're going to know if you're strong enough to be the exception. Most men will tell you they want a woman who's real, someone who feels things deeply, who's honest, who's present. Ask any man on a first date what he's looking for, and you'll hear some version of someone genuine. It sounds good in theory. It sounds good in a text message at 11 p.m. But theory and reality are two very different animals. Because when a man actually meets a woman who feels everything, who reads him like an open book, who refuses to play games, something strange happens. He panics. And today we're breaking down exactly why that happens, one layer at a time. Because understanding this isn't just about relationships. It's about understanding how the human nervous system responds to being truly seen. Let's start here. A deeply empathic woman doesn't process people the way most people do. She's not listening to your words. She's reading your nervous system. She catches the half-second pause before you answer a question. She notices when your voice tightens even a little. She feels the shift in a room before anyone says a word out loud. This isn't a personality quirk. It's closer to a radar system that never turns off. And for a man who has spent his entire life learning to keep his cards close to his chest, being read this accurately for the first time feels less like intimacy and more like exposure. It feels like standing in a spotlight he never asked to be under. And here's where it gets interesting, because this is where reason number 1 comes in, and it might be the biggest reason relationships like this fall apart before they even get started. She will not let a lie sit in the room. Not a big one, not a small one, not even the ones you tell yourself. If something feels off, she names it, immediately. Not because she wants a fight, because to her, silence around a problem is worse than the problem itself. Most people are trained from childhood to avoid conflict at all costs. Smile through it. Let it go. Don't make things awkward. She never got that training, or if she did, she rejected it because she learned somewhere along the way that avoiding an uncomfortable conversation today just guarantees a bigger explosion later. So she says the thing, out loud, right away. And here's the part most men get completely wrong. They think this directness is an attack. They think she's trying to control them, corner them, catch them in something. So they get defensive. They shut down. They start treating honesty like it's a weapon being used against them, when really, it's the opposite. It's the safest thing that's ever happened to them, and they don't even recognize it because they've never experienced it before. Think about that for a second. If a woman is willing to tell you the uncomfortable truth to your face, that means she's not managing you. She's not performing a version of the relationship for social media or for her friends. She's not stockpiling resentment behind a fake smile, waiting to blindside you 6 months later with a breakup you never saw coming. She's choosing the harder, more vulnerable path because she'd rather have one uncomfortable conversation than a decade of quiet dishonesty. But most men have never been loved that transparently before, and when it finally happens, it feels like an attack simply because it's unfamiliar. That's it. That's the whole reason. Unfamiliar feels dangerous, even when it's actually just honest. Now here's where things escalate, because directness alone isn't the full picture. There's a second layer to this, and it's even more intense. When a woman like this decides she cares about you, she doesn't ration it out. There's no slow drip. There's no calculated pacing designed to keep you guessing. She goes all in, fast and completely. She remembers the small thing you mentioned once in passing 3 weeks ago. She shows up for you in ways you didn't even know you needed. She gives you her full attention, her full loyalty, her full emotional presence, and she does it without keeping score. For a lot of men, especially men who've spent years in the modern dating landscape learning to protect themselves, this level of intensity doesn't register as love, it registers as pressure. Somewhere along the way, a lot of men were taught that being wanted too much is a red flag. That if someone shows up fully, something must be wrong with them. So instead of leaning into it, they start looking for the catch. They start pulling back to test whether it's real or worse, they start feeling suffocated by something that was never meant to suffocate them. It was meant to nourish them. Here's the psychological trap most men fall into without even realizing it. They've confused emotional scarcity with emotional value. Somewhere in their dating history, they learned that if someone is easy to access emotionally, they must not be valuable. That the chase is the point. That love is supposed to feel like a slow negotiation. So when a woman skips the games entirely and just loves them openly, immediately, generously, their brain doesn't know how to file that information. It doesn't match the pattern they've been trained on. And when something doesn't match the pattern, the nervous system treats it as a threat, even when it's actually a gift. Now let's talk about something that trips up almost every man who's ever dated a woman like this. And it's the one that causes the most arguments early on. She's going to ask questions. A lot of them. And not the shallow kind either, not "how was your day?" She's going to want to understand the why behind your behavior, why you got quiet after that phone call, why your mood shifted the second your brother's name came up, why you say you're fine when your body language is telling a completely different story. To her, these aren't random questions. They're pieces of a puzzle she's trying to assemble because she can't fully relax into a connection until she understands the person she's connecting with. But to a man who's used to keeping things surface level, this can feel like an interrogation. It can feel exhausting. He wants to unwind, not analyze his own subconscious out loud on a Tuesday night. So he gets short with her. He tells her she's overthinking things. He accuses her of making something out of nothing, and that right there is the moment things start to crack, because what he's actually doing is rejecting her attempt to build safety. Here's something almost nobody explains correctly. When a woman like this asks a lot of questions, it is not about control. It is about risk management for her own heart. She has felt real pain before. She knows exactly how devastating it is to give everything to someone who wasn't who they claimed to be. So before she goes all in, she needs to understand the terrain. She needs to know that what she's building her trust on is solid ground, not sand. Every question is a brick in that foundation. When a man shuts that process down, he's not avoiding annoyance, he's accidentally telling her the ground isn't safe, and her nervous system will believe him. Now, pay attention here, because this next one is where most relationships either solidify or completely collapse, and it happens faster than people expect. Once she decides you're it, there's no ambiguous middle ground. No, let's see where this goes. No keeping her options open just in case something better shows up. She's exclusive in her mind and her heart the moment she commits, and she naturally starts imagining a future that includes you in it. Not because she's rushing things, because that's simply how deep emotional investment works for her. She doesn't know how to love someone halfway. And for a huge number of men, this immediate depth is where the fear kicks in hardest. Because a lot of men enter relationships with one foot still out the door, keeping their options open, not fully committing until they're absolutely certain it's safe to. When they meet someone who's already building a future with them within weeks, it can feel like being rushed into a decision they didn't agree to make yet. Instead of seeing this as devotion, they see it as pressure. Instead of feeling chosen, they feel cornered. Here's the truth almost nobody wants to hear, though. That fear says a lot more about the man's relationship with commitment than it does about her intensity. A person who runs from fast, genuine devotion isn't protecting themselves from being trapped. They're protecting themselves from being truly known, because once someone commits that fully, there's nowhere left to hide. No more casual exit ramps, No more keeping things vague enough to walk away without consequence. That's terrifying for someone who's never practiced real vulnerability. But for the man who's actually ready, this kind of devotion isn't a cage. It's the safest, most stable ground he'll ever stand on. Now here's where it gets almost tragic, because this next trait is the one that gets weaponized against her the most, and she rarely even sees it coming. She doesn't give up easily. When things get hard, she doesn't bail at the first sign of friction. She digs in. She remembers the good moments and holds on to them like proof that the relationship is worth saving. She'll give second chances, third chances, sometimes chances she probably shouldn't give at all, because deep down she believes that enough love, enough patience, enough effort can repair almost anything. And here's the dark side of that beautiful trait. Some men learn to exploit it. Once they realize she's not going anywhere, no matter how many times they let her down, they stop putting in effort. Why would they? She's already proven she'll stay through the hard parts, so the incentive to treat her well, quietly, disappears. This is one of the most heartbreaking patterns in modern relationships. The very loyalty that should be treasured becomes the thing that gets taken advantage of, simply because it was never met with equal effort in return. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in this pattern, on either side of it, I want you to really sit with this next part. Persistence without reciprocity isn't love. It's a slow erosion of self-respect disguised as devotion. A relationship only works when both people are fighting for it. One person's loyalty was never designed to compensate for the other person's absence. Now let's shift gears, because this next one confuses men more than almost anything else on this list, and it has nothing to do with emotion at all. It's about independence. You'd think someone this emotionally attuned would need constant reassurance, constant hand-holding, constant emotional management. It's actually the opposite. Women like this have spent years learning how to sit with their own feelings, process their own storms, and function without needing someone else to regulate them. They're not looking for a rescuer. They're looking for a partner who can walk beside them as an equal. And for a certain type of man, this creates an unexpected identity crisis. Some men are wired to feel valuable through being needed. If a woman can pay her own bills, solve her own problems, and manage her own emotions without leaning on him for every single thing, he starts to feel unnecessary. Instead of respecting her strength, he feels threatened by it, because somewhere along the way, he confused being needed with being loved. Those are not the same thing. A woman who doesn't need you, but still chooses you, every single day is offering something far more valuable than dependence. She's offering genuine, voluntary devotion, and that should feel like winning, not losing. Here's the sixth pattern, and this one is sneaky because it disguises itself as love the whole time it's causing damage. Because she sees potential in people, she often falls into the habit of trying to help her partner become the best version of himself. She'll gently push him to take better care of his health, to finally deal with old wounds he's been avoiding, to go after the career he keeps talking about but never pursuing. In her mind, this is an act of love. She believes in him more than he believes in himself, and she wants to help him get there. But most men do not experience this as encouragement. They experience it as criticism wearing a nice outfit. They start to feel like a project instead of a partner, like nothing they do is ever quite enough, and that feeling breeds resentment fast. He starts pulling away, not because he doesn't want to grow, but because he wants to feel accepted exactly as he is today, not as a future version that hasn't arrived yet. Here's the lesson buried inside this one. Support and pressure can look almost identical from the outside, but they feel completely different from the inside. The difference comes down to timing and permission. Encouragement that's asked for feels like partnership. Encouragement that's forced feels like judgment. Even the most well-intentioned woman can accidentally push someone away if she forgets to ask whether he wants help before she starts giving it. Now, this last one is the one that confuses men the most, because it looks like the opposite of everything we've just talked about. Despite all of that emotional depth, despite that intensity and honesty, there's often a wall. A real, noticeable, sometimes frustrating wall. Because she feels everything so intensely, she's also more aware than most people of exactly how much damage the wrong person can do. So she protects herself. She watches. She waits. She doesn't hand her heart to just anyone who shows interest, no matter how charming they are in the beginning. And to a man trying to get close to her, this can feel confusing, even cold. He expected warmth right away, and instead he's met with quiet observation. He might assume she's not interested, or that she's simply hard to read, and he gives up before he ever gets close enough to see what's actually behind that wall. Here's what he's missing. That wall isn't rejection. It's a filtering system built from real experience, designed to protect something valuable from being handed to someone who hasn't proven they deserve it yet. The men who actually earn their way past that wall are the ones willing to be patient, consistent, and steady without demanding instant access. The ones who give up too early never even get to see what they were standing in front of. So, let's bring this all together, because there's a pattern running underneath every single one of these 8 reasons, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Or think about the adult child in a family who has spent their entire life being the one who mediates conflict, who remembers everyone's medical appointments, who absorbs a parent's criticism without pushing back, because pushing back never seemed worth the fallout. For decades, that role is invisible, because it's just how they are. Then something shifts. They start answering calls less quickly. They stop offering to host holidays. They give shorter answers at dinner. The family calls them distant or busy or says they've changed. What actually happened is that decades of one-sided emotional labor finally crossed a threshold that had been building since childhood, and nobody in that family had ever once stopped to ask what it might be costing them. Even in professional settings, this exact pattern shows up. The employee who always stays late to help a struggling coworker, who always volunteers to smooth over a client's frustration, who becomes the person everyone brings their problems to informally, without a title or a raise attached to any of it. For a while, that generosity gets rewarded with praise, maybe even a little extra recognition. But praise isn't the same as reciprocity, and eventually, that same employee starts turning down extra requests, starts leaving exactly on time, starts declining to be the emotional buffer they used to volunteer to be. Managers often read this as a motivation problem. It's rarely a motivation problem. It's the exact same reciprocity imbalance we've been talking about this entire time, just wearing a different uniform. I'm telling you this because the pattern isn't limited to romantic relationships, even though that's usually where it gets discussed the most. It is a universal signature of what happens whenever one person consistently gives more than they receive in any relationship for long enough, without anyone noticing or adjusting. The setting changes. The underlying mechanism never does. There's a term for this kind of self-fulfilling loop, and once you understand it, you'll start seeing it everywhere. Psychologists sometimes call it a protective prophecy. The inner critic finds a flaw, real or exaggerated. That flaw becomes the reason to create distance. The distance creates conflict or disconnection in the relationship. And that disconnection becomes proof in the avoidant person's mind that they were right all along to expect it. The prophecy fulfills itself, and the alarm system gets just a little bit louder for next time. Notice how airtight that loop is. It doesn't need the other person to actually be flawed or unreliable. It only needs enough ambiguity to fill in the blanks with the story the brain already expects to hear. A late text becomes evidence of disinterest. A busy week becomes evidence of pulling away. A disagreement becomes evidence that this too is going to fall apart eventually, just like everything always has. Now here's what I want you to take away from everything we just covered, because understanding this pattern is only useful if it changes how you handle it. If you recognized yourself in some of these signs, I want you to hear this clearly. This is not a character flaw. This is not proof that you're broken or incapable of love. This is a strategy your younger self built to survive an environment that didn't meet your needs. It worked. It kept you safe. But the environment has changed, And the strategy that once protected you might now be the exact thing keeping you from the connection you actually want. And if you recognized someone else in this, someone you love, someone you're frustrated with, someone who keeps pulling away right when things get good, understand that their distance is almost never a measurement of how much you matter to them. It's a measurement of how loud that old alarm system still is. Every single trait we just covered is not actually the problem. The honesty isn't the problem. The intensity isn't the problem. The independence, the questions, the loyalty, none of it is the problem. The real problem is that most people were never taught how to receive real love. They were taught how to survive shallow love, how to protect themselves from being hurt, how to keep one foot out the door just in case. And when someone finally shows up offering the real thing, unguarded and unfiltered, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels like danger, simply because it's unfamiliar. This isn't really a story about empaths at all. It's a story about emotional readiness. A deeply feeling woman isn't too much. She's simply operating at full volume in a world that trained most people to whisper. The men who run from her aren't running because she's flawed. They're running because loving her requires a version of themselves they haven't built yet. The version that can sit with honesty instead of flinching from it. The version that can receive devotion without suspecting a trap. The version that can be truly known and still choose to stay. And here's the part that matters most, whether you're the one asking these questions about someone else, or whether you just recognized yourself somewhere in this list. Growth isn't about becoming someone who can tolerate this kind of love. It's about becoming someone who's genuinely ready for it. Because the moment you stop seeing depth as pressure and start seeing it as an invitation, everything changes. That's when you stop running from the mirror and you finally start looking into it.